Next section, death and dismemberment report, as I like to call it. It's like your local news update. It's always bad, right? The coronavirus cases are over 2 million, and we've hit our horrible milestone of 100,000. And now we're in that 100, and this was as of the 13th. So we're closer to that 115 or 120 number is coming up pretty soon. Carl always gives me grief over this mortality rate. It's just a math number there. It's much higher than the real mortality rate, which is probably in that 1% range, probably 1 to 2. Because of this, you just don't know how many cases are out there. We have confirmed cases, but we don't know how many true cases are everywhere. On the other hand, we do know who's died, or at least some semblance of that number. There's probably the deaths are probably understated too, but the cases are probably way understated. And so it's more likely not to be as big a number, but it's still 1% would be 10 times as deadly as the flu, as seasonal flu. So
I'll just comment a little bit on the statistics I've done, where I've looked at the lowest, infection fatality rate by country I've seen is the 1.4%. And I forget it was New Zealand or Australia or Taiwan, but they're all in that 1.4 to 1.6% range. Other places have higher rates of infection fatality rates, but I suspect that's because they've got less testing of people who, were unlikely to die. And that's why our rate is much higher. And so I expect that the final rate will be somewhere in this 1 to 2% range, both for the country and for the world. But we'll see. Fauci was the last rate he gave was 2%, and I think WHO was still up at 3% as the rate they were estimating at that point.
Ed, you had a comment? Do you care to share it? I saw some text come through.
The comment says deaths are likely underreported. Go ahead, Ed.
I just, I look at this every day, and I've looked at the reports that other areas are lower than they ought to be, so probably some things are miscalculated, but you do an order of magnitude calculation, you find the deaths are probably maybe around 10% underreported COVID-19 deaths, which means that they're about 90% accurate, which means they're good enough for planning purposes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And just as a clarification, where it says June 13 up there, that's 4% of the world population. These are as U.S. of the world. So 4% of the world population, 27% of the world's cases, 27% of the world's deaths as a state. All right, here's a comparison. Deaths per million people. So trying to figure out who's doing better or worse across countries in terms of deaths. And you can see the trends here, deaths per million people as of a point in time. So, or cumulatively, sorry. So, we're in that 300 deaths per million, and Sweden, France, Spain, United Kingdom are up above us. Something came through today that said the United Kingdom is probably even worse than it looks. That their extra, what's the term for this? The additional death rate. That's not the right term, but it's the compared to a normal point, compared to the number of deaths that they had, let's say at this time last year, the UK is much, much higher, and those numbers aren't necessarily finding their way into into some of these figures. So that was something that came out today. I haven't gone through it, but so everybody's still trying to figure out how to report this the most, the accurately. And I should say, some people are trying to figure out how to inaccurately report it. There's some of that going around in the world too, but in many cases, there's a good faith effort going on to try to get to the right numbers. But anyway,
I think the last on deaths per million people, the overall world rate according to Worldometers was around 60. So, but again, that includes a bunch of countries, big countries, where we think their reported numbers are highly suspect, like China and India.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say, if I might, that there's a lot of debate about how many total deaths are or are not, and I just don't think that's the most important thing. To me, the most important thing is when we can get the rate of death under control to the point where contact tracing, pervasive testing, contact tracing, and target isolation will allow us to ensure that the remaining people with the virus aren't walking around amongst us. And that's what lacking a virus, that's the only way you can open up safely. So I'm always looking at not so much what the total deaths are, but when the death rate gets below about 100 a day for the country.
Yeah, when you can walk into a store and not think you're going to get sick.
Yeah.
Say that again, please.
When you can walk into a store and not worry about whether or not you're going to get sick. Then you go out.
Well, I don't know. I walk into a store frequently, and I don't worry about getting sick in the store. What I want to know is when choir rehearsal can start again. That's what I want to know.
What's that choir rehearsal with that massive infection rate? Yeah. Yes. If you're not sure of the reference, there was a super spreader event where, what was it, like 57 out of 60 people or something got it. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the rate of infection and I think it started out, one of them had it, or was it more than one? But
I
spread it
think
to
it's
all
just
the
one.
other people. Yeah.
It
And they
was
were all
just one.
singing and inhaling, and it was brutal.
Well,
In a tight space.
there's a test station. There's an Illinois test station right near me, and I'm thinking we could start choir when everybody goes to get a test that afternoon and comes in with a certificate. The other thing is I got a trip to Germany scheduled in September, and I got to figure out what a health certificate would mean so I can prove to them I'm good for that.
Yeah.
Germany, by the way, actually already decided they're not allowing anybody from external borders until August 31st. They already decided. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm monitoring
for
whole
me, 'cause
Europe.
my trip's in September.
No, even with Austria allows to enter if you have a certificate which is up to 3 days, I think, and there are a couple of other countries. But Germany is like, no, I could not believe, but they said like, literally, they said not until August 31st. They kind of, not doing any of the Schengen or EU anymore. So like each country have their own rules, and it's like ridiculous. Like it's very difficult to navigate because I'm trying to get to Finland, and I already wrote to their border control and everything, and I'm just giving up. It's impossible to figure out what they allow and what's not, because they open borders between some countries, do not allow with others. Others do it differently, and some allow transfer. Like Germany actually said they will allow transfer, but strictly through the transfer zone, which means that you do not enter EU when you fly to Germany, how it was before. I'm like, I do not see what they're doing. France want to open for tourism, like other people do not want to open, so other people close borders with France, other countries. I mean, I'm not optimistic about this.
Yeah, me either. Certainly not here.
You do not have family there. I haven't seen my husband since January, okay, and I cannot get there.
Wow.
I like watching it very closely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the confirmed cases, 7-day averages, the U.S. is sort of having trouble getting below 20,000. We're sort of bouncing along at this 21,000 level and have been for a little while. The deaths have continued to come down, fortunately. We'll see if these increases in cases that we're starting to see in other parts of the country start to move this trend upward. I'll show you some slides here about different states, but at least right now we've got flat for the cases, and then down, still trending down for the deaths. But 20,000 cases a day is an awful lot. That's an awful lot of cases. All right. This is the tests per day, which we're starting to get up toward that 500,000 number, which is the kind of a rule of thumb, was sort of the minimum that a couple of articles I read, that the experts are saying you got to get at least 500,000. You may need to get up toward 1 million or even more, but at least get to 500,000, and we seem to be getting closer to that. And the percentage of those that are positive is in that 5% range. That was also where they said, I've seen numbers between 3 to 5% for that you want to have a positive cases of 3, or obviously would be love to be 0, but you're getting enough testing when you're starting to get that number down in that 5 to 3 range is what people were saying. 200 out of the 300 million Americans that got this and a 1% fatality rate, you're in 1 to 2%, you're looking at a few million dead. And that's a calamity. So we're far away from getting this idea of herd immunity, and if it's even doable, if it's even really giving you long-term immunity to this bug, and this thing could mutate, it could change, and you might not be immune to it. Again, you don't know. We just don't know. So this study was in the New York Times. It's linked to Washington Post. I bet the Times probably covered it too, but there are a couple of studies that came out, and I've summarized them here. This site, the covidexitstrategy.org, has a couple of nice sort of dashboards that you can use to kind of get a quick picture of things, and I've got a couple slides from them following here too. But you can see the South is trending badly generally, and there's a few bright spots where we had these couple cases. We had big hits in certain cities or states, and those have been coming down significantly. But this site has some nice helpful graphics for spotting this. This one was another one of their graphics, and they have a whole bunch of data on here, but this was just a list of some of the states that are really struggling and kind of what's been happening in the last 14 days of cases. How many cases did they have in the last 14 days? So starting to see these numbers jumping. There's when you superimpose kind of these are US states. There was a chart that I ran into the other day where it shows foreign countries, and foreign countries, many of them, Italy, France, Germany, they have a shape that looks like Illinois. For the most part, it's this dome, and they're getting their stuff under control. Whereas when you see with Florida, we've got kind of this double peak where you could argue that once they put in some protective measures, it dropped, and now it's resuming with them reducing their restrictions. However, I wouldn't swear it could be more random than that. I don't know. I don't know that enough studies have been done. We've had enough to look at, but so you got a double peak there. You've got Texas and California sort of steadily growing, and Illinois in this dome pattern where Chicago probably disproportionately influenced this, and Chicago sort of locked down and got it under control, at least to some extent. And so you have a dome, and that's again what many foreign countries look like that you would think of as our peer groups, or the richer countries in Europe have that dome shape. They've got this thing. They're on the right path, whereas we're still wrestling with this in various states. This thing tends to hit. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Specifically to the Chicago region, Cook County is the major driver of all the numbers in Illinois. Cook County is in great shape. We're moving down significantly. The collar counties are small, but they're moving up. The collar counties are not doing well. And in fact, there's a lot of, you go out to some of the collar counties, you'll find people just not wearing masks at all.
Right.
So right. Cook County is really driving it, and it's in good shape.
Okay. Thank you. All right. There's some income inequality or damage by income quintile, and it shows you kind of what percent have been laid off by income or reduced hours, pay, how they're trying to afford it, and then what percent of them have been approved for unemployment. This is from Gallup. And you can see that the income is disproportionately on lower income folks. They're taking a hit. Now, Carl mentioned way earlier that as you get into certain, well, he didn't say it this way, but the income, because of the checks that went out and because of the expanded unemployment, there is actually consumer income. The income that people were getting actually was up. Spending was way down, and so savings was through the roof. The state personal savings rate is usually in that single digit level, and now it's 33% or something in the last month. So people are really, they've got a lot of this money has come to them. So even though there is a lot of damage being done here, and I would not want to be in these lower end groups, there is a lot of money getting fed into that through the unemployment and through the checks that are going to lower income folks that aren't not getting to the top end, and for good reason. While this shows you the disproportionate impact, it doesn't lay in kind of how much each of these groups got in terms of aid, and there is a lot of aid that has been going to these bottom groups, but still, it's a lot of damage.